My mother-in-law Opal just turned 87. She has never, not once in over 40 years, thrown away a piece of produce because it went bad before she could use it. Not a tomato, not a bunch of parsley, not a single wilted carrot. I used to think that was impossible. I used to think I was just bad at groceries. Then I moved to Kentucky, married her son, and started watching how she actually works a kitchen. What I saw changed everything I thought I knew about storing food. It was not about fancy containers. It was not about vacuum sealers or expensive gadgets. It was knowledge. Pure, practical, decades-tested knowledge about how produce actually behaves. Today, I am going to show you exactly what Opal taught me. Every method has a reason behind it. Every reason is backed by real food science. This is not folklore. This is how produce works. And once you understand it, you will never waste food the same way again. If you are new here, subscribe before we get into this. I share what 3 generations of women in my family figured out about feeding a household without waste and without breaking the bank. Hit subscribe and let's get into it. Opal grew up during the Depression in eastern Kentucky. She was born in 1939. Her family grew almost everything they ate on a quarter-acre plot behind the house. Nothing went to waste because nothing could afford to go to waste. That mindset never left her. Even after refrigerators became standard, after supermarkets opened nearby, she kept thinking about food the way her mother taught her. You store it right the first time or you lose it. The first thing Opal ever said to me about produce was this: everything in the kitchen is either giving off gas or breathing it in. You put the wrong things together and they ruin each other. I thought she was being poetic. She was not. She was describing ethylene gas, a real documented chemical process that happens with every piece of fruit and many vegetables you bring home. Ethylene is a natural plant hormone. It is a gas. Certain fruits and vegetables produce it in large amounts as they ripen. Apples are one of the highest producers. Bananas are another. Avocados produce significant ethylene. Tomatoes do too. And here is what most people do not know. Ethylene produced by one piece of produce can trigger and accelerate ripening in the produce stored nearby. This is not old wives' tale chemistry. This is documented produce science used in commercial agriculture. Orchards actually control ethylene in storage facilities to manage how fast fruit ripens before shipping. Opal did not know the technical name for it, but she knew exactly what it did because she had watched it her entire life. She kept her apples completely separate from everything else in the cold pantry. She never put bananas in the fruit bowl next to the avocados she was trying to hold for the end of the week. She understood that each item had its own pace, and putting the fast ones next to the slow ones meant losing the slow ones every single time. I had been doing that for years without realizing it. Once I moved the bananas away from the rest of my produce, I started seeing the difference within days. Avocados I needed for Friday were still firm on Friday. Leafy greens in the same drawer as apples had been dying on me for years. I moved them and the greens lasted nearly twice as long. This one change alone cut my produce waste significantly. The second big lesson from Opal was about humidity. Not temperature, humidity. Most people know refrigerators have a crisper drawer. Most people have no idea what that drawer is actually for or how it works. Opal did not have a manual, but she had instinct built from decades of observation, and it matched the science almost perfectly. Leafy greens need high humidity to survive. That means kale, spinach, lettuce, parsley, cilantro, green onions. All of them lose water rapidly once they are cut from the plant. They do not ripen the way fruit does. They simply desiccate. They dry out and wilt. High humidity in storage slows that water loss and keeps them viable for days longer. Most crisper drawers have a small vent or slider on them. Close it all the way for your leafy greens. That traps humidity inside and creates the environment those greens need. Opal used to wrap her greens loosely in a just barely damp cloth and put them in the coolest part of her cold pantry. The principle is identical. Keep moisture near the leaves without drowning them. Herbs are the same. Fresh parsley, cilantro, and basil die fast because most people lay them in the drawer like they are dead already. Opal stood them up in a small jar with an inch of cold water at the bottom, like a bouquet, and put a loose plastic bag over the top. Parsley stored that way lasts over a week. Most people are throwing parsley away in 3 days because they laid it flat in a plastic bag and then forgot about it. Root vegetables are the opposite. Carrots, turnips, beets, radishes. These want low humidity. Too much moisture around them causes rot at the surface. Opal kept her carrots in dry sand in the root cellar. That sounds extreme until you understand what the sand is doing. It is wicking away surface moisture and keeping each carrot slightly isolated from the others. A single soft or rotting carrot in a closed bag can ruin the whole bag within days because the moisture it releases accelerates decay in its neighbors. If you do not have a root cellar, and most people do not, the low humidity drawer in your refrigerator is the practical substitute. Leave a little airflow. Do not seal them in a tight plastic bag. A bag with a few holes punched in it or a loosely closed container gives carrots and similar vegetables the breathing room they need to last. Mushrooms deserve their own conversation because they are probably the most mishandled item in most refrigerators. I used to buy a container of mushrooms on Sunday and they would be slimy by Wednesday. I thought that was just how mushrooms were. Opal taught me that was completely preventable. Mushrooms are over 90% water. They are also still biologically active after harvest. They are still respiring, still releasing moisture. Put them in a sealed plastic container or a plastic bag, and that moisture has nowhere to go. It pools. It sits against the surface of the mushroom, and slime follows within 48 hours. Opal wrapped mushrooms in newspaper and set them in an open paper bag. The newspaper absorbs excess moisture from the surface. The paper bag allows airflow. The mushrooms can breathe out and the moisture escapes instead of collecting. I switched to this method and my mushrooms went from lasting 2 days to lasting a week without any slime at all. The plastic produces the slime. The paper prevents it. That is the entire secret. This brings me to Opal's broader principle about containers. She was deeply suspicious of airtight plastic. Not because she was against plastic on principle. She was a practical woman, not an idealist. But because she understood that most produce needs to breathe. Sealing produce airtight traps the gases it produces, traps the moisture it releases, and accelerates exactly the decay you are trying to prevent. Her wooden produce boxes in the cold pantry had gaps between the slats. That was not poor construction. That was intentional design. The airflow kept the internal environment stable. The wood itself absorbed small amounts of moisture. Opal kept potatoes, sweet potatoes, winter squash, and onions in those boxes for months without significant loss. Potatoes are worth talking about specifically because the refrigerator is absolutely the wrong place for them. Most people know this vaguely, but they do not know why. At refrigerator temperatures, the starch in potatoes begins converting to sugar. This changes the flavor. Potatoes become oddly sweet and gummy when cooked. It also changes how they react when you try to cook them at high heat. Refrigerated potatoes brown faster and unevenly when fried because of that excess sugar. Potatoes want cool, dark, and dry. A basement corner is ideal. A pantry cabinet away from heat and light works fine. They do not want cold. They do not want light. Light triggers solanine production, which is the compound that turns potato skin green and in large amounts is mildly toxic. They do not want moisture. They do not want to be near onions. That last point surprises people. Onions and potatoes are traditionally stored together. Opal kept them completely separate. Onions produce ethylene and release moisture as they sit. Potatoes absorb that moisture and ripen faster in response to the ethylene. Store them together, and both go bad faster than they would alone. Keep them in separate dark corners of the same pantry, and both last for weeks. Garlic follows similar principles. Never refrigerate garlic. Cold temperatures change the cellular structure, alter the flavor, and cause it to sprout rapidly once it warms back up. Garlic wants a cool, dry, well-ventilated spot. A small mesh bag hung in the pantry, the way Opal did it, allows airflow on all sides and keeps garlic lasting 2 to 3 months without issue. Tomatoes may be the most commonly mishandled vegetable in American kitchens. The refrigerator destroys tomatoes. It does not preserve them. Cold temperatures cause what food scientists call chilling injury in tomatoes. The cellular membranes break down, the texture becomes mealy and mushy, and the flavor compounds degrade significantly. Opal never put a tomato in the refrigerator, and she was completely right. A tomato picked before full ripeness should sit at room temperature, stem side down, away from direct sunlight. Stem side down reduces moisture loss at the scar where the tomato was attached to the plant. It slows the ripening just slightly without disrupting the flavor development. Opal used to line her tomatoes up on the windowsill away from the afternoon sun. They ripened evenly and tasted the way tomatoes are supposed to taste. The same principle applies to avocados. A hard avocado should never go in the refrigerator until it is fully ripe. Cold stops the ripening process almost entirely. You will wait a week for a hard avocado to soften in a cold refrigerator. At room temperature, away from apples and bananas, it softens in 2 to 4 days depending on how firm it started. Once it is ripe, once it yields to gentle pressure, then it goes in the refrigerator, and it will hold there for another 2 or 3 days before it turns. Opal used this timing principle across her entire pantry. She did not refrigerate things that were not ready. She did not leave things at room temperature that had already peaked. She watched her produce the way a nurse watches a patient, with attention, without panic, and with specific interventions at the right moments. That nursing comparison is not accidental. Opal spent 30 years taking care of the people around her before formal medical training even existed in her community. She learned to read signs of change. She applied that exact skill to her kitchen. A soft spot on an apple meant that apple moved to the front of the line. You used it today. A tomato with a bruise went directly into a sauce. Nothing waited until it was fully gone to be used. You used it at the first sign it was turning. This is what I think most people miss about produce management. It is not a passive activity. You do not buy vegetables, put them somewhere, and hope for the best. You check, you rotate, you move things around based on what you see. Opal walked through her pantry and cold cellar every single morning, not because she was obsessive, because it took 3 minutes and it saved her from losing anything. I do the same thing now. Every morning before breakfast, I look at what I have. I move what is closest to turning into tomorrow's plan. I pull the mushrooms to the front if they are starting to look dry at the edges. I check the tomatoes. I look at the greens. This habit is more responsible for my reduction in food waste than any storage trick I learned. The storage tricks keep produce alive longer. The morning check ensures I actually use it. Now let me tell you about Opal's egg test. I learned this from her about 2 years into my marriage, and it felt like discovering something that should have been on a poster in every American kitchen. Eggs are one of the most commonly wasted items in refrigerators because people do not know how to tell if they are still good. The water test is real science. When an egg is freshly laid, there is almost no air inside the shell. As the egg ages, the contents shrink slightly and an air cell forms at the wide end of the egg. The older the egg, the larger that air cell, and the more it floats. A fresh egg sinks and lays flat on the bottom of a glass of cold water. A week-old egg sinks but tilts upward at the wide end. A 2-week-old egg stands upright on the bottom. An egg that floats is old enough that you should smell it before using it. Opal never threw away an egg based on the carton date alone. She used the float test every time. She would tell you that the date on the carton is a sell-by date, not a safety date, and those are not the same thing. A properly refrigerated egg can be safe and usable for 3 to 5 weeks past the sell-by date. She knew this from experience. The science confirms it. Her pantry in winter looked like a different planet from modern American kitchens. She had no plastic wrap on anything in the cold cellar. She had wooden crates, mesh bags, newspaper, cloth, paper bags, and glass jars. Everything was visible. Nothing was buried under other things. She could see the state of everything she had at a glance. That visibility was deliberate. Opal said that food you cannot see is food you forget, and food you forget is food you throw away. She kept her pantry organized not by category but by urgency. The things closest to their peak were at the front. The long keepers were at the back. She restocked from the back and used from the front every time. This system, first in, first out, is used in every commercial kitchen and food service operation in the world. It is not complicated. It is disciplined. Most home kitchens run on the opposite system by accident. New groceries go in front because that is where you put the bag down, and the old produce gets pushed to the back where you forget about it until it has turned. Opal's cold cellar ran on 2 temperatures. The main pantry stayed around 55 degrees in winter, cool enough to slow ripening dramatically, warm enough that cellular damage did not occur in cold-sensitive produce. A separate lower section, dug into the hillside, stayed closer to 40 degrees for items that wanted more cold. Certain root vegetables, cured meats, dairy. She knew intuitively that different things wanted different temperatures, and she arranged her storage accordingly. Most people have one refrigerator set to one temperature, and everything goes in together. That is not ideal, but it is workable if you understand which items should not be in there at all. Tomatoes, potatoes, onions, garlic, avocados before ripening, whole squash, most citrus, and keep those out. The refrigerator is for things that actually benefit from cold. That list is shorter than most people think. Bread is another item Opal never refrigerated. Cold air stales bread faster than room temperature does. The starch in bread goes through a process called retrogradation. The starch molecules recrystallize in cold temperatures, which is what staling actually is. Bread at room temperature in a breathable cloth bag stays soft longer than bread in a refrigerator. Bread in a plastic bag stays soft because the plastic traps moisture, but it also encourages mold faster. Opal used cloth. She refreshed bread in a warm oven when needed. She never froze bread unless she had excess she could not use that week. What Opal built over 40 years was not a set of tricks. It was a system. Every item in her kitchen had a known place, a known lifespan, and a known set of conditions it needed. She did not have to think hard about any of it after a certain point. It became automatic because she had built the habits deliberately over years of paying attention. That is what I have tried to build in my own kitchen in rural Kentucky. I am not at 40 years yet, but I am at a place where I throw away almost nothing. When something does go bad before I use it, I treat it as information. What went wrong? What did I miss? What should I change next time? That is the mindset Opal modeled. Not guilt, not waste. Information and correction. The store wants you to keep buying. That is the honest truth. Every time you throw away produce, you need to buy more. The grocery industry has no interest in you storing food well. They have an interest in you coming back. Opal understood that implicitly. She did not say it to be cynical. She said it because she had watched that dynamic her entire adult life, and she was not willing to participate in it more than she had to. She grew what she could. She stored what she grew with precision and care. She bought what she could not grow, and she made it last. That approach funded her household, fed her family through hard years, and built a level of food security that most people today have no framework for understanding. I am passing what she taught me on to you, not because it is charming or nostalgic, because it works, because food science confirms it, because it will save you money every single week for the rest of your life if you put it into practice. Start with one change this week. Move your bananas away from your other produce. See what happens. Or stop refrigerating your tomatoes and taste the difference. Or wrap your mushrooms in newspaper instead of leaving them in plastic. Pick the one that makes the most sense for what you throw away most often. Build from there. If you found any of this useful, subscribe before you leave. I put out new videos every week on how to feed a household the way my mother-in-law taught me, with knowledge, not gadgets, and nothing going to waste. And if you have a technique your own grandmother or mother-in-law passed down that you want to see covered, leave it in the comments. I read every single one. This is how I was raised, and I am passing it on to you. Opal would not have it any other way.